June 15, 1944. Dawn breaks over the Pacific, casting a pale light across the jagged coral cliffs of Saipan. The sea is deceptively calm, its gentle waves masking the chaos about to erupt. In the distance, the rumble of engines grows louder, hundreds of Higgins boats carrying U.S. Marines surge toward the beach, their metal hulls glinting under the morning sun. Smoke from naval bombardments drifts across the horizon, twisting like ghosts over the emerald water. On the cliffs above, Japanese commanders peer through telescopes, disbelief etched into their faces. Reports arrive in rapid succession. Enemy forces are advancing faster than expected. Overcoming defenses once thought impregnable, trenches meant to hold back invaders lie empty, bunkers meant to delay the assault crumble under coordinated naval fire. Messages are sent frantically, officers shouting orders that arrive too late. Every hour, every minute, the Americans push further inland. Amid the tension, the first cries of battle echo across the beach. For the Japanese command, the pace of the U.S. advance is not just surprising, it is incomprehensible. They cannot believe the speed, the precision, and the relentless determination of the forces before them. The stage is set. The Pacific War is about to pivot. By mid-1943, the Pacific War had become a vast chessboard of islands, each a critical point of contention between two empires. Japan, having seized much of Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific after Pearl Harbor, believed its defensive perimeter was unassailable. The vast stretches of ocean coupled with fortified islands seemed a natural barrier against any enemy advance. Yet the United States had recalibrated its strategy. Following the disastrous surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the U.S. Navy rebuilt, trained, and reorganized with relentless determination. Key victories at the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, and most decisively at Midway in June, shifted the momentum. Japanese Navy had lost 4 aircraft carriers, a blow from which it never fully recovered. These battles revealed a crucial truth: air power and naval coordination could challenge even the most entrenched positions. In response, American strategists conceived the island-hopping campaign. Rather than attacking every Japanese-held island, they would target strategically vital locations, airfields, supply hubs, and naval bases, while bypassing others. Each captured island would serve as a stepping stone, a forward base to support the next assault. The strategy relied on speed, precision, and logistical superiority, a mobile, flexible approach that could outpace the slower, reactive Japanese command. The islands themselves presented a unique challenge. Dense jungles, jagged cliffs, volcanic rock, and shifting tides made amphibious assaults extraordinarily difficult. Beaches were mined, coral reefs could shred landing craft. Japanese engineers transformed these islands into formidable fortresses, using every natural feature to their advantage. On islands like Tarawa and Guadalcanal, defenders learned to maximize minimal resources, constructing bunkers, pillboxes, and interconnected tunnels. Yet, for all their preparation, the Japanese underestimated the scale and coordination of the U.S. war machine. American forces, meanwhile, honed their methods through trial and adaptation. Amphibious vehicles, landing crafts, and naval bombardment tactics were refined in increasingly realistic exercises. Marines trained to move under fire, to secure beachheads, and to dig in quickly. Engineers developed portable pontoons and bridging equipment capable of overcoming coral reefs and rocky shores. Intelligence units studied aerial photographs, intercepted communications, and mapped terrain with meticulous care. Every assault was preceded by careful planning, yet executed with speed that often left the enemy disoriented. By the end of 1943, the first island-hopping campaigns had begun. Guadalcanal, in late 1942 and early 1943, had demonstrated both the cost and effectiveness of combined land, sea, and operations. The bloody lessons of Tarawa in November 1943 reinforced the necessity of overwhelming naval firepower before landing troops. Each operation was a careful balance between aggression and caution, calculated to minimize American casualties while maximizing psychological and strategic impact on Japanese forces. At the Japanese command level, disbelief simmered. Orders often lagged behind reality. Field Commanders struggled to interpret the speed and unpredictability of American movements. While entrenched positions could slow an enemy, they could not stop a coordinated, rapid assault that leveraged both technology and logistics. Reports of U.S. advances spread through Japanese headquarters like wildfire, producing frustration, confusion, and a deepening sense of shock. It was in this environment, a war of attrition, speed, and ingenuity, that the U.S. prepared to strike the Marianas, a chain of islands central to Japan's defensive perimeter. The stage was set for an unprecedented display of operational tempo. The Japanese high command, confident in their fortifications and the ocean's natural defenses, was about to confront an enemy moving faster than they could anticipate. As the U.S. prepared for the Marianas campaign in mid-1944, every aspect of the operation was meticulously planned. Intelligence officers studied aerial reconnaissance photos, mapping every hill, coral reef, and river mouth. Codebreakers intercepted Japanese communications, revealing troop deployments and fortification patterns. Planners identified Saipan, Tinian, and Guam as critical nodes, airfields that would bring the Japanese home islands within reach of American bombers while simultaneously cutting supply lines to forward garrisons. The Japanese, by contrast, operated under a rigid defensive doctrine. Commanders assumed that geography would buy time, that fortifications and natural barriers could withstand repeated assaults. Coastal artillery, pillboxes, and network trenches were designed to force attackers into kill zones. Each island was intended to be a last stand where defenders could inflict maximum casualties and stall the enemy's advance. Yet the pace of U.S. operations often caught them unprepared. U.S. forces adapted quickly. Pre-landing bombardments combined battleship gunfire, carrier-based airstrikes, and long-range artillery to neutralize key defensive positions. Landing craft were designed to cross reefs and reach the beach under heavy fire. Marines and Army units rehearsed combined operations, moving in coordinated waves to secure initial objectives before Japanese reinforcements could organize. This speed and precision, coupled with overwhelming logistical support, created a rhythm that the Japanese command found almost impossible to counter. The psychological impact on Japanese commanders was profound. Reports from Saipan arriving within hours of initial landings described beachheads already secured, bunkers destroyed, and defenders overrun. Orders to redeploy units often arrived too late or were ignored by frontline officers facing chaos. The Japanese belief in a gradual attritional defense was shattered by an enemy that struck decisively and relentlessly, refusing to pause. This operational tempo was not accidental. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz and General Holland M. Smith emphasized coordination between Navy and Marine forces, ensuring that each assault built upon previous gains. Supplies, reinforcements, and medical evacuation were integrated into the planning from the start. Each island seized became a forward base, enabling the next operation to begin almost immediately. Japanese commanders, accustomed to longer periods of maneuver and regrouping, found themselves reacting to events rather than shaping them. On the ground, U.S. troops faced the brutality of combat, yet their momentum never faltered. Engineers cleared obstacles with speed, medics treated the wounded under fire, and officers adapted to changing conditions in real time. Every landing reinforced the impression that American forces moved faster than Japanese intelligence or command could track. The speed of advance, combined with overwhelming firepower, created a sense of inevitability that undermined morale and sapped the will to resist. By mid-1944, the pattern was clear. U.S. forces would strike, secure a foothold, and press forward before the Japanese could consolidate. Each island taken further exposed Japan's overextended defensive perimeter, forcing commanders into reactive, desperate measures. This combination of planning, speed, and operational flexibility defined the island-hopping campaign and set the stage for the stunning shock experienced by Japanese leadership at Saipan and beyond. On the beaches of Saipan, the human dimension of war was starkly visible. U.S. Marines and Army soldiers emerged from landing craft into a maelstrom of gunfire, smoke, and exploding shells. Every movement demanded precision, courage, and endurance. These men were not mere Instruments of strategy, they were individuals facing the raw terror of combat, the psychological. Strain was immense, fear, adrenaline, and training intersected in a crucible of survival. 4. Every Marine advancing inland, there were others providing covering fire, evacuating the wounded, or navigating treacherous coral reefs under fire. The speed of the assault depended not just on machinery or planning, but on human resilience. On the Japanese side, soldiers entrenched in bunkers and caves faced a different shock. They had prepared to repel invaders, yet the pace of the American advance outstripped their expectations. Orders arrived too late, reinforcements failed to materialize, many experienced the psychological disorientation of being outflanked or cut off, witnessing positions fall almost as soon as they were fortified. Commanders observed the swift U.S. movements with disbelief, realizing that the enemy's will and coordination surpassed anything they had anticipated. The island-hopping strategy itself was a masterclass in tactical innovation. U.S. forces targeted specific islands, bypassing others to conserve resources and maintain momentum. Amphibious landings were preceded by intense naval and aerial bombardments designed to neutralize enemy defenses. On Saipan, landing waves were meticulously timed, the first to secure the beachhead, the second to reinforce, the third to expand inland. Engineers cleared obstacles under fire while artillery units provided continuous suppression. Japanese defenses, though formidable, were built for a slower, more attritional engagement. Fortifications assumed attackers would be delayed by terrain and obstacles, yet the Americans' coordination of land, sea, and air combat overwhelmed static positions before defenders could fully react. Every successful landing illustrated the tactical genius of combining mobility with overwhelming firepower, and the speed of execution left Japanese commanders struggling to adjust. Technology magnified the impact of U.S. tactics. Higgins boats enabled troops to land directly on beaches previously inaccessible due to coral reefs. Naval gunfire from battleships and cruisers could obliterate bunkers and trench networks, softening resistance before troops even touched sand. Carrier-based aircraft provided continuous reconnaissance and close air support, adjusting strikes in real time. Communication technology allowed coordination across hundreds of miles, synchronizing movements that Japanese defenders could neither predict nor counter effectively. For Japanese commanders, this integration of technology and strategy was astonishing. Coastal guns, previously a deterrent to naval assault, were rendered ineffective by aerial spotting and preemptive bombardment. Reinforcements could not arrive in time, and supply lines were cut by a combination of sea and air control. The sheer pace of the operations, amplified by these technological advantages, created a sense of inevitability. The Americans would reach their objectives before the Japanese could organize a meaningful response. At the helm of the U.S. island-hopping campaign were leaders whose vision and coordination transformed strategy into action. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, oversaw operations with meticulous attention to logistics, timing, and force composition. He understood that success depended not only on superior firepower, but on maintaining momentum. Across vast distances, General Holland M. Howland "Mad" Smith, leading the Marine forces, emphasized rigorous training, flexibility, and morale, ensuring that troops could adapt to the chaos of amphibious landings and inland combat. Japanese leadership, by contrast, was caught in a reactive stance. Admirals like Chuichi Nagumo and generals such as Yoshitsugu Saito faced the impossible, defending vast island chains with limited forces against an enemy moving faster than intelligence or reinforcements could arrive. On Saipan, commanders issued orders in disbelief, struggling to coordinate counterattacks against landings that seemed to anticipate every defensive position. Even experienced officers could not reconcile the Americans' speed with the traditional defensive principles of attrition and fortified positions. From the Japanese perspective, the U.S. campaign was disorienting. Troop movements were rapid, synchronized, and unpredictable. Each captured beachhead threatened to unravel entire defensive networks. Messages from the front lines reported American forces advancing faster and expected overwhelming positions before defenders could organize on islands like Saipan. In Tinian, Japanese commanders recorded shock and frustration in operational logs, noting the unprecedented tempo and relentless pressure of the attackers. These observations underscored a stark reality: the U.S. had redefined the operational pace of modern warfare in the Pacific, and Japan's traditional doctrines were unable to respond effectively. The human cost of rapid operations weighed heavily on both sides. U.S. troops faced harrowing casualties yet pressed forward to maintain momentum, balancing operational necessity with the instinct for survival. Japanese soldiers, often isolated in bunkers and caves, faced a grim calculus: resist to the last man or surrender against overwhelming odds. Civilians unoccupied islands were drawn into the conflict, caught between artillery, airstrikes, and advancing armies. The moral burden of the campaign, on leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike, became a defining aspect of the island-hopping strategy. The speed of U.S. operations magnified these effects, turning every engagement into a high-stakes struggle where decisions had immediate and often irreversible consequences. Each of these angles, human endurance, tactical innovation, technological integration, decisive leadership, enemy disorientation, and moral consequence, converged on a single truth: the Pacific War was accelerating beyond anything Japan had anticipated. The stage was set for a moment where these forces would collide in a decisive battle, a turning point that would make the Japanese command question the very possibility of halting the American advance. June 15, 1944, the first wave of U.S. Marines touched the beaches of Saipan at dawn, greeted by the roar of artillery and the sharp crack of machine gun fire. The coral sands were littered with obstacles, barbed wire, mines, and wooden stakes designed to shred landing craft. Yet the Americans pressed forward, each man trained to move under fire, to advance while supporting comrades, to seize terrain before the defenders could organize a coordinated response. Above the beach, Japanese commanders watched in disbelief. Reports flowed in: American forces had secured initial positions faster than intelligence had predicted. Bunkers that were supposed to hold out for days were silenced in hours. Observation posts relayed the alarming pace of advance inland. Every maneuver seemed anticipated, every defensive position bypassed or destroyed. The speed of the assault was not a matter of luck. Naval gunfire from battleships and cruisers had softened key points, while carrier-based aircraft strafed and bombed defensive positions. Engineers cleared obstacles, bulldozers moved forward to create temporary roads, and artillery units set up positions within striking distance of Japanese fortifications. Every element of the operation moved in a tightly choreographed sequence, leaving little room for the defenders to recover. For the Japanese, the psychological effect was profound. Soldiers entrenched in fortified positions were cut off or surrounded within hours. Officers sent orders that were ignored, misunderstood, or rendered obsolete by the Americans' rapid advance. Confusion reigned as units attempted counterattacks, only to find their flanks exposed or their support destroyed. The belief that geography and fortifications could delay an enemy was shattered. Amid the chaos, acts of individual heroism punctuated the larger picture. Marines advanced under relentless fire, carrying wounded comrades, neutralizing machine gun nests, and pressing forward despite exhaustion and fear. On the Japanese side, defenders displayed desperate courage, mounting counterattacks even as the outcome became increasingly inevitable. These human stories underscored the brutality and intensity of the turning point, a moment when training, planning, and sheer determination collided with preparation, courage, and the limits of defensive doctrine. By nightfall, the Americans had secured a substantial foothold, pushing inland faster than Japanese commanders had anticipated. Coastal defenses were overrun, supply lines severed, and the sense of control that had defined Japanese strategy began to crumble. The pace of the operation demonstrated a new paradigm in warfare. Speed, coordination, and adaptability could overcome even the most formidable fortifications. By June 16, 1944, the American foothold on Saipan had expanded rapidly. Troops moved inland, seizing ridges and valleys that were expected to slow the advance for days. artillery, and mortars. Pounded Japanese positions, while air support strafed retreating defenders. The synchronization between naval, air, and ground forces created a relentless momentum. Each hour brought new gains, forcing Japanese commanders into frantic improvisation. General Yoshitsugu Seido, tasked with defending Saipan, faced an impossible calculus. Orders to reinforce threatened sectors arrived too late, and troops already committed to counterattacks found themselves isolated under overwhelming fire. In many instances, Japanese units fought to the last man, their determination both heroic and tragic, yet even acts of courage could not halt the Americans' surge. The pace of the operation, from beachhead to inland advance, rendered traditional defensive strategies obsolete. The psychological impact extended beyond the battlefield. Japanese commanders documented their disbelief in operational logs, noting the Americans' ability to seize terrain faster than predicted and to adapt instantly to unexpected conditions. Every defensive plan was rendered provisional, every calculation uncertain. The speed and precision of the U.S. forces not only inflicted casualties but shattered confidence in command, forcing a reactive posture that left little room for strategic thought. Meanwhile, American leaders pressed their advantage. Admiral Nimitz and General Smith monitored progress closely, reallocating reserves to exploit breakthroughs and reinforce tenuous positions. Logistics units ensured a continuous flow of supplies, ammunition, and medical care, preventing the advance from stalling. Engineers repaired roads and bridges under fire, facilitating the movement of artillery and reinforcements. This seamless integration of operational planning and execution exemplified the U.S. approach, overwhelming speed combined with methodical preparation. By June 17, the Japanese defensive perimeter had collapsed across multiple sectors. What was projected as a prolonged struggle to control the island had transformed into a rapid, near-total domination. For the Japanese command, the lesson was unmistakable. American forces were capable of moving faster, striking harder, and sustaining operations in ways previously unimaginable. The speed of the island-hopping campaign had not only captured territory but also imposed a psychological toll that would influence all subsequent engagements in the Pacific. The battle for Saipan marked a turning point in the Pacific War. It demonstrated that fortifications and numbers alone could not stop a disciplined, coordinated, and fast-moving adversary. The Japanese High Command, shocked by the pace of the American advance, would struggle to adjust for the remainder of the campaign. The stage was set for the aftermath. Strategic, operational, and psychological reckoning that would redefine the trajectory of the Pacific theater. By late June 1944, the battle for Saipan had concluded with a decisive American victory. The island, a critical link in Japan's defensive perimeter, now lay under U.S. control. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. U.S. forces suffered roughly 3,400 casualties, including dead and wounded, a staggering toll for a single island. Japanese losses, by contrast, were catastrophic. Of the approximately 30,000 defenders, only a few thousand survived, many driven to suicide by the collapse of command and the relentless advance of the Americans. Territorially, the capture of Saipan shifted the strategic balance in the Pacific. Airfields on the island allowed US B-29 bombers to strike the Japanese home islands directly, bringing the heart of Japan within range for the first time in the war. The psychological impact was equally profound. The American advance had reached the doorstep of the Japanese homeland, demonstrating the effectiveness of the island-hopping campaign and eroding the perception of invulnerability that Japan had cultivated since 1941. Japanese command morale was shattered. The speed and coordination of the American assault exposed flaws in defensive doctrine, intelligence, and communication. Field reports noted commanders' disbelief, frustration, and inability to respond effectively to the pace of U.S. operations. Retreating or isolated units compounded the chaos, further highlighting the failure of pre-war assumptions about fortified island defense. For American commanders, the victory validated the operational principles of island hopping. Speed, surprise, and logistical coordination could overcome even heavily fortified positions. each. Captured island became a springboard for the next operation, shortening supply lines, extending operational reach and maintaining momentum. The lessons learned at Saipan informed subsequent assaults on Tinian, Guam, and Peleliu, emphasizing rapid exploitation over protracted attritional fighting. Civilian populations on the island suffered immensely, thousands of Okinawan and Mariana civilians were caught in the crossfire, some killed in bombings, others trapped in caves used as defensive positions by Japanese soldiers. The human cost, though secondary and strategic planning, underscored the moral and ethical weight of the campaign, a reality felt by soldiers and commanders alike. The stage was now set for continued U.S. advances across the Pacific, each operation leveraging the lessons of Saipan. The Japanese High Command faced an uncomfortable truth: their defensive perimeter was no longer impenetrable, and the tempo of the American advance had redefined the parameters of war in the Pacific. Following the fall of Saipan, the ripple effects across the Pacific were profound. Japanese High Command grappled with the reality that their defensive network was no longer impenetrable. The loss of Saipan forced the Japanese Navy and Army to reevaluate strategy, hastily reinforcing remaining islands while struggling to replace lost troops and materiel. The speed and efficiency of the U.S. advance had created a new operational standard, one the Japanese could scarcely match given overstretched supply lines and dwindling resources. American forces, buoyed by success, moved swiftly to capitalize on their momentum. Within weeks, attention shifted to Tinian and Guam. The lessons of Saipan: coordinated naval bombardment, rapid troop landings, and seamless logistics were applied with precision. Engineers and support units worked tirelessly to turn captured airfields into operational hubs, enabling the deployment of long-range bombers capable of striking the Japanese home islands. Each subsequent assault built upon the tactical, technological, and logistical foundations established on Saipan. The psychological impact on Japanese commanders and troops was equally significant. Reports from the front lines documented disbelief and frustration. Fortifications designed to stall invaders had been overcome in a matter of hours. Reserves intended to counterattack were neutralized before reaching the front. The rapid collapse of organized defense created an atmosphere of uncertainty and demoralization, which extended to soldiers and civilians alike. The speed of U.S. operations had not only seized territory but shattered confidence, forcing Japan into reactive measures that often proved too little, too late. Strategically, the capture of Saipan marked a turning point in the Pacific War. It allowed the U.S. to establish bases within bomber range of Tokyo, opening a new phase of aerial bombardment and psychological pressure on the Japanese homeland. The fall of Saipan also signaled to Allied commanders that the island-hopping campaign, when executed with precision and speed, could systematically dismantle Japan's perimeter defenses while conserving resources and minimizing protracted attritional battles. In retrospect, the aftermath of Saipan highlighted the transformational impact of operational tempo, speed, coordination, and adaptability, not merely numbers or fortifications, defined success in the Pacific theater. For Japan, the inability to match this tempo exposed vulnerabilities that would be exploited in subsequent campaigns, culminating in a strategic trajectory that increasingly favored the Allies. The stage was now prepared for a final reflection, a calm, cinematic look at what the rapid U.S. advance meant for history, technology, and the human dimension of warfare. The speed of the U.S. island-hopping campaign in the Pacific was more than a tactical achievement. It was a revelation in modern warfare. On islands like Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, the coordination of sea, air, and land forces redefined what was possible in operational tempo. The Japanese commanders' disbelief was not mere exaggeration. It reflected a profound shift. The rules of engagement, fortifications, terrain, and numbers, once considered decisive, were rendered secondary to speed, adaptability, and integration. For the soldiers on both sides, the human dimension was stark and enduring. Marines pressed forward through fire and water, guided by training, discipline, and sheer resolve. Japanese defenders faced impossible odds, their courage tested against an enemy whose momentum seemed inexorable. Civilians, caught between armies, endured the invisible consequences of strategy, displacement, fear, and the chaos of rapid conflict. The speed of the campaign magnified the stakes, compressing life-and-death decisions into hours and minutes, shaping the psychological landscape of war as indelibly as the physical one. Strategically, the campaign demonstrated the power of planning married to flexibility. Each captured island became a springboard for the next, illustrating that operational rhythm could dictate the course of a theater of war. Technology, from Higgins boats to carrier aircraft, from artillery coordination to communications, enabled this rhythm, yet it was human decision making that gave it purpose and precision. History remembers the speed of island hopping not only for its victories, but for its lessons that adaptability, foresight, and courage can overcome even the most formidable defenses, that momentum can be weaponized as decisively as firepower, and that the human spirit, under pressure, is capable of extraordinary endurance. In the end, the Pacific Islands, once fortified bastions of resistance, stand as silent witnesses. Their beaches, cliffs, and jungles hold the memory of men moving faster than expectations, of commanders struggling to comprehend the pace of history itself. The speed of the U.S. advance reshaped the war, leaving a legacy of tactical innovation, psychological insight, and a somber reflection on the human cost of progress in conflict.